Welcome everyone. We will start our session in a few minutes, just waiting for more people to dial in. Okay, we have more than 200 people in the room. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Wacom Comic Week on this lovely morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us. Thank you for joining us today, being here on the fourth and final day of our online comics and creativity event, brought to you by Wacom and Clip Studio Paint. We have a great session waiting for you today with the exceptionally talented Mitch Leeuwe. So before we start and jump into the presentation, let me share some of the basic housekeeping rules, just simple stuff, nothing too fancy. The session is going to last roughly 1 hour, and we will have time for answering the questions you might have towards the end. With so many of you in the room, we probably won't be able to answer all the questions, but we will do our best. Please use the Q&A function of Zoom for your questions to our presenter and about the presented content. For technical issues like the screen share not functioning properly, or if you're having trouble with the audio, please use the chat box. We are all creatives and enthusiasts of comic and creative arts, so please be kind and do not spam the chat feed. This session is being recorded, and it will be available on Wacom YouTube page next week. You will also receive an email next week with the links, additional information, and some special offers from our sponsor, which includes a survey link, upon completing which you will have a chance to win 1 out of the 100 Clip Studio Paint Pro 3-month license keys. If you are new to Zoom, please do check out the gallery view and the speaker view options to find the best viewing experience for yourself. Click around freely, you cannot break anything, at least we hope you cannot. And you can also adjust the slider between screen share and the camera feeds to find the ideal settings for your viewing pleasure. Right, a brief summary of who we are. For those of you who don't know Wacom, we've been around for almost 40 years and pioneering digital pen input technology, which means every time you need to work or create on a computer and realize that the mouse and trackpad is not going to do the job, you might want to switch to a Wacom tablet and grab that pen. And the rest of you who know us, it's so nice to see you all here again. And this session is also brought to you by Clip Studio Paint. Those of you who have been following our online sessions in the past few months are already very familiar with our growing partnership with them. Clip Studio Paint is a versatile graphics software, best suited for drawing and painting to create a wide range of content. With a wealth of unique features, it helps to create anything from illustrations over comics to concept art and animation. No matter if professional or a hobbyist, Clip Studio Paint's natural drawing feel, along with its comic features, is loved by artists from all around the world. And the advertising slot. Last two topics before we start. We have an amazing offer for all of you. By visiting our e-store page, e-store.wacom.com/comicweek, you can discover the full range of our exclusive offers for those who attend Comic Week. Now is a great chance to take a screenshot of this page so that you can visit the e-store later. A wide range of Wacom products, including Wacom Cintiq Pro, Wacom Cintiq, Intuos Pro, and Mobile Studio Pros are waiting for you with up to 20% discount. And finally, time to start. Yes, today we have Mitch with us. He's a specialist in visual development, character design, and he's been creating environments for animation games, toys, comics, theme parks, and media since 2005. He has a very recognizable, fun, and cartoonish style, which is inspired by the cartoons, games, and animated movies from his childhood, like the Walt Disney, Looney Tunes, and Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Besides his work as a freelance artist, Mitch teaches online drawing classes on Instagram and Patreon, which are supported by his ebooks about different aspects of drawing. Without further ado, and there has been a lot of ado, let's listen to our presenter.
Thanks. So, hi everyone, welcome to this presentation. And let me first introduce myself. So yeah, I'm Mitch Leeuwe, and I'm from the Netherlands, 33 years old. And I wanted to go a bit through how I got where I am now, because maybe that can help some people a bit. Because when I started high school, I already drew a lot. I think when I was a child, I saw The Lion King, and then I wanted to be a Disney artist. I didn't have any idea what it was, but I wanted to do something with drawing. When I was on high school, I lost that dream a bit. And eventually I went to laboratorium technology. And I think for a lot of people, that's really recognizable that you choose some different way and that you get back to drawing. So when I was on doing that study, I got into graphic design. And because of that, I made a school switch to a media college, and I learned web design and so on. But more and more, I discovered that you can actually make a living with drawing illustrations and making animations. And so I continued studying. I'm not going too much in depth about that, but I also got internships at a game company. And that's when I graduated from my school. I got to become a game artist. And from there on, my passion for animation started growing more and more. And 2 years back, I made the decision to quit my job at a game studio and going freelance to try and work for animation studios as a freelance environment artist or character artist. But then I started posting more stuff on Instagram, and my Instagram started to grow really a lot. And that's how I some sort of became an online teacher with selling online courses and also making a lot of those tutorials available on Instagram and making the more in-depth tutorials on my Gumroad. So in this session, I want to share tips that really changed my life as an artist, that really opened my eyes on how to draw characters and how I started learning that. So let me start with that first slide. So here what I'm showing is how I use construction to draw characters.
Mitch, sorry for interrupting, but you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, the whole time not. Share. And now?
Yes, perfect. We see it now.
So, great. So here in this image, you can see how I draw characters and how I use construction. And I think this is, especially when you're starting out with drawing, this is really important. For example, let me just start with drawing this. So almost every time I start with a ball or another basic shape. And this is now flat. But when you add these construction lines or perspective guides, you can give it all these different names, you create a sphere, an object with a dimension like this. And what's useful about this is that you can easily, for example, if we draw another ball here, and then maybe now we're aiming it upwards. So we now have a direction this way and a direction this way. So it's easy or quite easy to draw these shapes in different angles. So when I have this, then I can start adding other shapes on top of it. For example, if I want to draw this this bunny, I can add the shape here for the zoom in for the mouth and the nose, and I draw the eyes. But it's really important that you think about how those shapes are on top of this ball. So you can also with this nose, it sticks out a little bit here. And this can really help you make your drawings more solid, like they're in an actual 3D world, and even when they're on this flat surface. So we can add some cheeks, like this here. And this is construction. And if I would start out again with drawing, I would really focus first on learning this. And also how to add shapes on top of this to create these drawings. So here, add these eyebrows. And then this mouth. And you can also easily draw different characters with this. For example, here I'm showing a squirrel, a mouse, and a bunny. And they all have the same head, but the ears are different. And those are basically different shapes. So for example, with a bunny, I start with drawing this outline, but I really try to think in those 3D construction shapes. And then I'm adding more shapes inward. So here now I'm removing this. And it's a bit like if you're sculpting with clay or something. So like this. And then adding another ear, going like this. So when you've learned this, then you can apply it with a line of action. So this is what I call construction. And I think that's the most important thing to start with. So the next thing that really changed a lot for me is the line of action. So the line of action is basically if you have a pose, ask yourself, how can I show that pose in a single line? And let me show it here. And then when I draw this line of action, so the first question I ask myself is what is the story I want to tell? And that can be, in this case, there's a boy running and we see it from the side. And then you ask yourself, how can I show that in a single line? And in this case, I think something like this. And most of the time, my action lines are a C kind of shape. So that's what you see here, or an S or an I. And you can go a bit more detailed than this, but most of the times I'm using a line like this. So when we have this line of action, we're adding construction on top of this. For example, we're adding this ball I showed earlier for the head. And then I'm going to add the torso. And you can see also here, two balls. So for example, here, you can also tell a bit about that. Here you see this body and what I'm basically doing. And this works really well for simple cartoon characters. It's almost this bean back. And here we have the rib cage. And here we have the pelvis. But this is then really detailed, and basically you just use, for a character like this, you just use a bean like this. So let me erase that and continue with this one. And this side profile is really great to learn that action line. Let's add the other things, like let's add a leg here. And this is also a bit how the order of how I draw characters. I start most of the time, of course, with the action line. Then I draw the head. Then I draw the body. And then I draw the legs. So here. And in this case, this leg is in front and this leg is in the back, as you can see here. So that means that here the arm is in the front. And I draw the legs first before the arms because they really, they are really important for the balance of the pose. and the arms are less important. You could draw them in different positions and so on. So here is arm, and now we're drawing this head. Like this. So now I have this construction, and I really try to have that flow in that character, like this here. Now I erase it a little bit, and I'm going to draw on top of it. So I'm going to add the eyes, and then the nose and the mouth. And try to, even when you're drawing this side profile, try to think about that construction. So the hair. So if this is the skull, try to think about that the hair needs some space between the skull and the hair top. So don't draw it, for example, if this is the head, don't draw it like this, that there's no space between the skull and the hair. So there's volume. So here. And let's make this a little bit simple, so I won't take too long about drawing this. Maybe another thing, because yeah, a lot of people ask about clothing. For example, and I can show that here with this leg. This boy is running forward. So that means that this pants is going like this. So there's one side of the pants that's close to the leg, and there's one side that is more separate. So think of it as if you're waving a flag. So now the flag is moving that way. And when we move the flag this way, the flag is waving like this. So basically what I want to show is here this line of action, and then we add the construction. But you still want to have all these flowing lines here. So I'm showing that a bit over here. So here you can really see I'm trying to combine that line of action and the construction, because we have all these shapes here like this. If you really think about construction, you would see these kind of shapes, but you want to connect those lines with each other. For example, you want to have this line going like this, so you have nice lines, but I will show more of that in a bit. So now I've shown how to use that line of action.
So we have two questions about lines of action.
Sure.
So one question is how to decode the line of action for complex poses, for example, ones with hand and legs crossed and similar body features. And another one, not necessarily about the line of action, but might be an interesting thing about the hair. How big is too big and how to keep it natural?
Let me first go into the hair, because the next slide was with a more complex pose about that line of action. But with hair, yeah, how big do you want to go? So the question was, when is it too big?
Yeah, how big is too big, because sometimes it starts looking not natural.
Yeah, I think it also really depends on what kind of style you're drawing in. So oftentimes I'm really drawing in this, yeah, you can say Disney kind of style, or all the feature animations you're seeing in the movies, and they are not super cartoony, but quite cartoony. And if you go more crazy, you can go more nuts. So that really depends on how cartoony you want to go. For example, with this character, I think this type of hair is already quite big, but I could try to make it even more bigger, like this. So it still works, but then if you see this character, you really have something like, oh, this character, there's something with his hair that is really, this character is all about his hair. So ask yourself, what is the story you want to try to tell with your character? And what is the type of style you're working in? And I think you need to just explore and try and ask yourself a lot of questions, and also show it to other people and then ask them how they experience this. So I hope that's useful. Let me go to the other question about the more complex line of action. And I think because the last one was from a side profile, and now I want to show one from a 3/4 angle. And I can show that here a bit. So this one is a little bit more detailed than the last one. So here again, there's a running lion. So how can I show that in a single action line? I think this should work. Then I'm going to add all these shapes of this character. And it's almost like you're drawing a stick figure. And that's also with a complex line of action. It helps when you draw it maybe first in a stick figure like this. And this can be something really difficult to learn. So what I would advise and what really helps is doing figure drawing. So you can go online. There are a lot of, for example, on YouTube, a lot of places where you can do online figure drawing. So maybe you can do that, and then try to draw those poses and using a line of action and then a stick figure like this, and etc. So that's a great way of learning how to draw poses. So what's hard about this is that we're now using perspective, and we're also showing a bit of overlap. For example, here with this hand especially. So we have this hand is going to us, and then this shoulder is behind his torso, like this. But I started with using those stick figures, and then on top of that, I'm adding this. Oh, my Photoshop is starting to lag. Have to wait a little bit. Yeah, there he is again. So I started with that stick figure, and to figure out how I want to draw the pose. And when I have that, I start adding in the construction. So how to deal with complex things is to really use these steps one at a time, and it makes it easier to understand. It's a little bit like if you're going to fitness, you're practicing one muscle at a time. So you're doing one time, you're practicing your legs or your biceps, and the same with drawing. At one moment you're practicing and focusing on the line of action, then on the construction, and then on inking and drawing. So really take these steps. First the line of action, then this stick figure, and then the construction, and then the smaller shapes, and make it and give it this flow, and so etc. And then add the details and the colors. So let me move this one, continue a bit on this. So now we have this construction done here. So here having this shape. Or let me take the blue version. It's a bit cleaned up. So maybe that if you're struggling with these things, maybe you can use this, you can screen grab this, this image and try to follow the steps I'm taking. And that's also how I learned. So how I learned to draw these things is basically by, what I did is watching a lot at old Looney Tunes cartoons. And then I started breaking them down as I did here. So making So pausing a YouTube of a old Looney Tune cartoon, and then I look at Bugs Bunny, and then I break it down in the line of action and trying to think how the construction works and so on. And you can use my tutorials the same way. So here you can see how I draw on top of this construction. For example, here with this arm, I really try to have this flow into it. So when you use too much construction, your drawings can get stiff. So you're using these lines to make it more appealing and flowing. So also try to think about that. So I hope that helps a bit with the line of action. So when you learned a bit of line of action and construction, what can also be really important to learn is a bit of anatomy. And I'm not a realistic artist, but I did study some anatomy. So here, this character is still cartoony and the body proportions are off, but it's basically based on, I learned this by studying real anatomy. And you can find on the internet, you can also find a lot of real anatomic pictures. So one thing that really helped me with remembering the proportions is by this. So maybe this is something that really helped me a lot. So let me draw this figure, the skeleton. So I first start with drawing a line, and we have these 2 points. Then I divide this line through a half, so like this. Then I divide it another time, again in half. So now we have, so make this brush smaller, 1/4, 1/4. And now I divide it again. So now I have 1/8 here. And I can now draw in the head here. So if I also divide this here, and divide this, divide this, divide this, now it's 8 parts. So it's 8 heads high. And it's a bit longer than a normal person, but it's really funny how you can figure the body proportions out with this. So if I divide this part in 3 parts, I know where the neck starts. And if I divide this in 3 parts, and here, I know how big the rib cage more or less needs to be. I think this is almost half a head wide here. So it's really funny how you can figure out the body proportions with these measurements. So here, drawing in the pelvis, like this, 1 head high. And once I have this, you can start drawing in the knees, and the knees are a little bit up above the half here. So here, drawing the knees here. And then I know the hip bones of our legs are at this point. So here. And then the feet are a bit up here. So that's here. And then we can draw this S shape here for the leg. And then a shape here, here. Also adding here this collarbones here and here. So this is basically how I learned anatomy. Drawing the hands here, and then here, like this, here. And this, although this body is 8 heads high, that's a little bit too long, but still, it's really interesting to see how that all matches up. And this is how I use it more for my character. So you can see I let those proportions loose a bit and I make the torso a bit more bigger than it is to create this character. But then you can see I'm using this construction and then also using these muscles. And it's really interesting that drawing these muscles, I'm also doing that by divide, and then you can also figure out all these muscles. And of course, that's now a bit too detailed to go really into depth about that. But that is how I learned basic anatomy. And that can really help with drawing characters. So for cartoon drawing, you don't really need to know all the anatomy, but it can't hurt, and it will help you certainly. So what is for me is really important is using shapes and more. So for example, when I'm drawing an head or a character, I'm using a lot of times these kind of shapes. I think I didn't talk about that with construction. So you heard me talking that I'm using a lot of spheres for drawing characters for construction, but I'm also using cylinders a lot of times and cubes. So when I'm constructing a character, I'm using these 3 types of shapes. So, and when you want to learn how to draw characters, it's really important that you learn to draw these shapes in all these different kind of angles. That will make it way more easy to draw characters. And I also use those shapes when I'm designing a character. For example, let me just show that here. And I want to draw a really strong character. A lot of times I'm using this square. And so let me erase this a little bit. And I always try to avoid the middle. So I think it's more interesting if we put the cross somewhere here. And I don't want to draw exactly the same characters there. So maybe rotate it like this. So let's make a really strong character here. And you see this also a lot in Disney movies and other movies. They're using these shapes to draw characters. For example, if you want to make a friendly character, a lot of times using round shapes really help. You can even make these eyes a little bit square and these eyebrows square, this nose is square. So you can try to see how far you can go with it. You can even make these ears square like this. I think that will help. Let's keep him bold. And let's make a round head. So this also works really well for children. Let's also put it down here. A round nose, a small mouth, and then big eyes or something. It's all very round, and it makes it really friendly. And you don't always have to use this. It's just a rule you can bend, but try watching an animated movie and try to recognize that shape language. So here, you can all see here, I also using these round shapes. So how to make, and then a triangle. So triangle is a lot of times used with evil characters. For example, here we have this triangle, so this is sharp. And you can also use that in the eyebrows, for example, here, and these eyes. And then maybe also in the nose. So make it really pointy and triangular. And I think it's a bit boring. So what I also sometimes do is, because I hear it's all in the middle, so trying to put it lower or higher. Maybe, yeah, higher works then best. So maybe we can make a vampire or something out of this. So maybe. And when you're sketching, it doesn't have to be pretty in this stage, because you can, if you erase it a little bit and going to draw on top of this, you can using nice lines to really make it work. But here in this stage, I'm really trying to find the shapes I'm trying to use. So here's also a part where I combine those shape language. For example, and here I'm talking a little bit more about proportions. So maybe I can best show that with drawing a snowman. So the most boring snowman you can make is this. So here I'm putting these things in the middle. So this is quite boring. We can make it a little bit more interesting by using a small shape, a medium shape, and a big shape, like this here. So this is already a little bit more interesting. How we can make it even more interesting is use a big head, a small body, and a medium-sized, yeah, I would say that the leg part. And let's put it a bit down here. So now we have this head here. So I also thought that I really am trying to avoid using the nose in the middle, etc. I think it's way more interesting if you use this nose here. And this is a small nose, so I think it's interesting to use big eyes. I think that's also more appealing. And then a medium mouth. So also trying to use in the facial features small, big, and medium. So here it's a big, small, and medium. And maybe use a small head here. So, and that creates a way more interesting character. And again, this part, a lot of times when I'm designing characters, I make ugly scribbles like this to figure out the sizes of the characters. So here. So like this. And let's go back to this one. So here you can see I'm using that same technique as well. So here in this character, you can see here this for the body. Let's use a different color. So here, this is the body, and then this is the head, and these are the legs. So you can really see that I'm really trying to use different sizes for it. And also that's that question about when do you know when the hair is too big. That depends on the style. You can't use this. This is really pushed, and you won't see that much in animated features that are more serious. But in more cartoony stuff, you can really use these proportions. What's also interesting, because here you can see I'm only using squares, or with the snowman I only used circles. What's also interesting to also use these shapes in variety. For example, here, if you have that snowman, like this, an even more interesting character is to play around with shape. So maybe use a triangle as an head, like this, and then maybe a square as body, and then, or maybe use the ball as body, and then the square here. And you can use this to make a character out of it. And this is something maybe I would recommend. If people have an art block or something, you can use this method to draw a character. So for example, I'm wondering, what am I going to make out of this, this shape? I think this feels like a dress or something. So maybe it's something like this here. So like this, drawing some feet here. And then I want to have this around. So making here maybe shape like this. Maybe it's the queen or something. So she has their arms like this. And maybe it looks like this, and this is her collar or something. I don't know, but this could be a start of drawing an original design, because how you use these different shapes to draw your character, and you can come up with all these different kind of characters. So here again, I'm showing how to use those shapes. So maybe it's also fun, before I'm going into this, I think I also saw that question in the chat. So if we have designed a character, so maybe make this a kind of Dracula, evil Dracula character. So with this nose. So, and we want to make something more 3D out of this. So what you can do is maybe start with drawing a cylinder. And this is how I use those shapes. So basically this is a cylinder, but then I made this part smaller. And then we have this triangle kind of shape. So erasing this a little bit. And then adding these perspective guides. Like this here. Then erase this a little bit. And now we can draw on top of this 3D shape. So here. And now I'm really trying to think how this works in 3D. So this nose, I think I want to make this long nose, then this mouth. Then here, this ear pinning on top of this here. And this is basically how I would draw a 3D, how I would start to translate that 2D design in a 3D model using that construction. I don't know, this is just a quick sketch, but it's basically the technique how I go from this to this, using those really basic shapes. Here, and I already showed that a little bit. I mean, again, using that small, big, and medium. So for example, if I would draw, let's draw a kid. So here, this is the most boring character you can draw. And maybe it's a style choice. So in some cases, this works for if you want to make this really dry comic cartoon, and you want to, you have all these different cartoons that use this. But I like to work in this more dynamic style of drawing, and then I play around with, for example, I put the eyes really up here, and I give it a really big nose, and then put this mouth small, and maybe not just round ears, but maybe really long ears. So really try to use some, to play around with those shapes. So here, maybe some hair up here. And then it's really good to first design your character like this. And then as the same as I did with that triangle shape, you can use these guides here. So, for example, and use those perspective guides, etc., to draw this character in 3D. And that's what I really recommend beginning artists to practice drawing dimensionally with these construction shapes. So how to translate this. So here I design it, and here I translate it to 3D. And really play around with those different proportions. And I really hope that's clear. So let's continue. So why I also like to use those basic shapes is that you get more consistent. So if you see these two characters, I think they both seem fine, but this one seems a little bit off. And that's because here these lines don't match up like this here. Here you can see that. And that happens when you're not drawing through your shapes. And here I did that, and then your drawings get more solid. So let me show that a little bit. So if I would draw this character, I really use these shapes, sketches, and this is actually how I would sketch. So I really try drawing through my shapes. You can, as if you see a wireframe or something. But the great thing, for example, if I'm drawing this this head on top of this, I'm drawing through it like this. So like this. Then I erase it a little bit. And then I'm going to use these guides to draw it correctly on top of it. So here. But because I drew through all these shapes, it matches up. So even when you don't see it, it's really good to draw through your shapes. Because when I wouldn't do that, and I just would draw, oh, here's a line, and then here's this head, and then here is this shape, then you can get these errors, that this line doesn't match up with this line, and that this line doesn't match up with this line. So I really would advise people to really draw through your shapes like this when you're sketching. And then later remove the lines you don't see. So I hope that's clear. Another thing is, and I'm really talking a lot about construction, and you need to watch out when you're using construction. And I think that's not. It's really good to focus on construction first, but your drawings can get a little bit stiff with that. But using CSI can be a really great way of making your drawings more appealing. So for example, if I draw an arm, so here, so for example, this looks like a robot arm, right? So here. And I think this is really good to practice first. When you're just starting out, it's really good to think in these 3D shapes. But what helps is using an S shape versus an I shape. An S shape versus, or let's make here an S shape. And then here an S shape. So in here, this is a bit exaggerated, but this is basically how I use this. So what I'm trying now is using an S shape versus an I, or a C against an S, or an I versus an S. So that's more interesting than using an S versus an S, or an I versus an I, or a C versus an I, because then you get arms like this, basically. And there are cartoons that are using this, but they're using this for their style. So, and I like to draw more in these kinds of ways for drawing an arm. So, and this is a bit exaggerated, but here you can see how I use that for this character. So it's a rule, you can play around a little bit with it, but whenever I find the drawing stiff and not interesting, I do use this. Also, another thing I'm using is, for example, when a character is bending, so and he's reaching out for his toes, here you can see those shapes here. So you get a bit of this. So then you see here you get this complex side versus this simple side. So that's also a lot of I'm using. So I'm using these contrast. So try to pick, for example, here in this leg, that's a little bit. So here this side is almost a line like this, and here there's more detail. So that's it. What is the meaning of CSI? So it basically means that I use these 3 types of lines like I'm showing here. So here I'm using this S, here I'm using this I, here I'm using this C, here I'm using this S. So I'm really trying to use these 3 different types of lines. So yeah, let's go to this style one. So again, there's actually no wrong or right when drawing in style. So here you can see this is more a character that you see on television shows, and this is something you would see more on feature animation. So it really depends on what kind of product you want to make. The same with that hair question. So what is your goal with it? And so I don't believe there's wrong or right when how you draw, but it's really important to stay consistent. Hope I'm saying it consistent. Yeah, that you really have your own type of rules and that you're sticking to it. For example, with this character, let's draw a bear in this style. So it's almost the same. So here I'm using the straight versus straight. So this is more iconic. And then here these eyes are like this. And then a nose, maybe. I hope I can do this out of my head. And that's also a thing. I always try to use reference For example, if I would draw a bear, I would Google a bear first. So there's some lag here for the line. Waiting here, but here you can see I'm using the straight versus straight and using the same kind of lines. So when I would draw this bear in a more organic style, I would use, I always start with that construction like this. There's really some lag on my PC right now. So yeah, there he is again. So for example, here this bear. So I'm really trying to use, for example, these eyes aren't just simply round, but I'm using a line here, a line here. So I'm really trying, here you can see I'm using 3 lines. And because of that, for example, if I show that here, there's no symmetry. So this side looks different than this side. Let's put these eyebrows here. Then I think something like this. Then put this nose here, this here. So here also this shape doesn't look symmetrical, and this does. So this looks this, and this looks more organic. So that's how I play around with style. So and you can see that here. This is basically the difference between that. What was that? Oh yeah. So a lot of times it's straight versus curved as well. And that is basically the same as that CSI. Yeah, that was those 10 tips. Are there some more questions about this?
Well, we have plenty of questions.
Oh.
I think more questions than we can answer.
Oh.
Just going through the main questions. I mean, there is one that was asked plenty of times and upvoted by the main community, not specifically about how you create your characters, but about the first part of your addressing the introduction part of your presentation, asking how to create a good portfolio for character design. What are the tips and tricks, like what it should include, what you should avoid, how many pages should it have, and stuff like that?
Yeah, oh, maybe that's a good question. One tip that helped me a lot, turn this off, is, for example, if you want to be a character artist, ask yourself, what does that mean? Do you want to work, for example, at Disney or Pixar, or do you want to work at a game studio? Where do you want to work? So ask yourself where. And what type of work would you do that there? So if you want to work at Disney, for example, as a character artist, you can get an art book. For example, I have a couple of art books for example, Big Hero 6 art book. And then try to look into that book. What kind of concept art do they make for the characters? And then the next thing what you can do for your portfolio is do as if you're already working there. And what that means is that you start your own concept art for your own movie. And I just can imagine just some movie, a superhero movie, or and design all the characters for it and make sketches about that, etc. So for example, I would make a portfolio most of the time 10 pages long, and on each make a page with a lineup of a character, lineup with characters. I think I have an image with that. So that's why I made this one. So I made a page with the character lineup like this. And then I took this character, and on the next page, I made a whole model sheet with it, with different poses of this parrot diver. And then I made some more sheets about maybe characters interacting with each other, maybe a turnaround of a different character. Maybe I would take this pig and also draw the family of the pig, so that you can show that you can really come up with, and that you can do the actual work. Do as if you're already working at the studio. And that was the biggest tip. And then if you want to be a character artist, don't add environment art in it. If you also make environment art, make a separate portfolio for that, and only use that when you're applying for that function. So be really clear about what you want to do and what you can mean for that company, what you can do for that company. So I hope that's clear. And
that's great. Those are great tips. Absolutely. We have received a lot of questions about absolute beginner level and more intermediate topics, and you actually answered a lot of those questions during your tutorial step by step. But still, maybe just to wrap up again, especially for an absolute beginner, what would be the first steps that they should focus on? I mean, you mentioned a lot about the shapes and action lines, but also, do you have any comments on, should anatomy come before lighting and other stuff?
I would really focus on drawing. I can show that here. I think I have my sketchbook here. So maybe I can switch to the camera for a second.
Yes,
or show it on the second camera.
We have the focus on the second camera right now.
Okay.
You can use that.
So also what I'm doing a lot, and you can see that here in the sketchbook, and I would recommend that for beginning artists, and you can also do this digitally, but try to fill each day 2 pages with your sketches. But yeah, this is actually a second part, because how I learned a lot of art is by studying. For example, when I was a kid, I was a fan of Looney Tunes. And so I took a lot of images and I copied the images, and I was really looking at the construction and the line of action and focusing on that. But this sketchbook and making drawings like this every day, just of random topics, it really helped me a lot. But this can also be a bit overwhelming if I'm now thinking a bit. Because can I move back to my screen?
Yes, of course. Hold on.
Thanks.
Your screen share is still active.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Basically, is practicing this, I would totally recommend to really beginner artists. So, for example, go watch an image of Bugs Bunny or one of my tutorials or someone else's tutorials, and really follow those steps with construction. So I think really important to learn construction first, and use other people's art to learn that. And then if you got that, then learn the action line, etc. And save painting for later. The drawing part's really important, and that's what I wanted to tell about my sketchbook, is that you really learn a lot from sketching and maybe studying other people's art, and don't simply copy it, but try to understand it.
So how would you rate the shift or the time you spent on working on sketchbook and also using references for your drawings compared to right now and the beginning of your career?
When I started, I really focused a lot, and I got a lot of beginning artists ask me, how do you develop your own style? And I think it's important, but in the beginning, it's way more important to learn skill, and you learn that a lot by studying other people's art. So I would really focus as much as you can on that. But of course, it gets boring. It's studying. It's like going to the sports school to fitness. It's training, and so really focus on doing that. But on the side, if you want to have some fun with drawing, go ahead, draw your own characters. But you will learn the most from studying tutorials, other arts. Try everything you can and try to learn as much. Yeah, there's no real simple answer. The most important answer is to just keep drawing a lot. That is basically the secret. Yeah.
Compared to, once again, compared to the beginning and right now, do you still run into art blocks or like long times of lack of motivation, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, a lot, and that's also basically drawing is also a job. When I was, and I'm still really happy that I can make my living with art, but sometimes, yeah, you have to work on things, and even when it's drawing, yeah, sometimes that's still difficult. And when I have an art block, the best answer to deal with an art block is to just start. Um, and then and I use that with my sketchbook. So, and also one way of how I deal with art block is just draw a random shape, for example, and then start to draw a character inside that shape. So it's like watching at clouds and then playing around. So make a weird shape and then try to draw an alien inside it. And yeah, those are some things you can do to deal with art block. You have to start. Yeah, that's the best way to deal with an art block for me. Yeah.
Going through the other questions, this was also something that was asked multiple times. How do you avoid drawing the same face all the time, and also vice versa? How do you make sure you keep the consistent facial features when you are telling the story of the same character?
Yeah. For the first question, I try to use that idea of using these three basic shapes, and then yeah, try to come up with as much variations as I can. For example, you can also combine those shapes. For example, square, triangle, and a circle. But then maybe you can also use the circle in the middle, and then the rectangle and the triangle, and combine them, and maybe make it. There's this big triangle, and then this small square, and then yeah, using this small ball, and then use that to draw a head out of. So really playing around with those big shapes, and then put the eyes here. And I'm now just doing something crazy, but I really play around with those shapes to make different characters. That is how I try to avoid that, and really compare with drawings you made before. And for the second question, is this really helps. So using these perspective guides, and then, for example, adding a shape here and then here. So, and you can also use this for more complex characters, but if I have to draw this head in a, for example, this character is looking up here, I'm using these perspective guides and these steps to draw this character consistent. And that's why all those old cartoons use this technology, technique to draw these characters and make them look the same with using these things. And also, I showed that about proportions, that you make a character and that you think, oh, make a line divided through half, and then draw the head and then the body. And for example, when you're drawing this character in a running pose, you draw this S, and then you divide it, drawing the head, drawing the body. So you're using these proportions in this action line for example. And that's how you try to stay consistent. But a lot of time it's a lot of correcting, and that's something you hear that's really difficult about drawing characters in different poses to stay consistent. Yeah.
You've been using digital drawing for the majority of your career.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any technique that will make drawing something or creating something faster, but you still like to do it the old school way, going through the details all by yourself?
I think I didn't really understand the question. So,
like basically, if there's a shortcut for it, but you would much rather do it by your own instead of using the shortcut.
By digitally,
Mm-hmm.
by using. Actually, when you're learning, it's really good to not use too much zoom in and to really start. So and that's also why I like to draw on paper. You can't use Ctrl-Z, etc. But you can also use that digitally, right? So when you're drawing a character, try to avoid zooming in, because, for example, if I'm going to draw this head and I want to draw a nose here, and I really zoom in, and I'm going to draw this really detailed nose here, for example, here. You even have some hairs here, and then there's this zip, and then here, and there's this line here. This looks way too detailed for a character like this nose, because I was really zoomed in. So watch out using too much, to rely too much on those things. I hope that helped a bit.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go through last couple of questions. This was also mentioned multiple times. How do you pick your color palette?
Yeah, you have the, I think, the colors. I think it's probably really small, but I hope you can, here it's a bit bigger. So, and the best thing is to use a color wheel, and I don't have it here. I think it's, I don't know if it's included here now. No, but maybe if you Google color wheel, you will get this wheel of colors. And then you see red is here, and then I think blue is here, and then purple is, purple is here, and this green is here. So, for example, if I'm using a red color, the opposite color is actually green. So if I'm using red, the secondary color or the opposite color is green. So then I'm trying to make this color scheme with that. And it's a bit hard to tell with those examples, but if you're using a color wheel, you can use methods like that to create your own color palettes. So I'm using cold against, so let me really quickly make a character here. So if this was a character and this character was green, the opposite color of green is red. But the red is really a color that adds a lot of things. So I would add some details like this, maybe red shoes, etc. This doesn't work correctly yet, but I work with those opposite colors. So if you look at color wheel and color schemes, you can learn a lot about that. That's what I'm using. So the color wheel and color schemes to create color palettes. For example, that method of using green and red is secondary, or that is opposite color scheme. And then you also have a lot of different bunch of schemes you can use. but that is out of my head. I'm not totally sure. I've made some tutorials about that, but I hope that's a bit clear. It's a really big topic. Yeah.
Definitely. It's a topic, a session of its own when you think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure our audience, by checking out your Instagram and also your further detailed tutorials, they can find more about this topic.
Mhm.
Last two question. Is there any specific character or project that you really struggled with?
Yeah, sometimes you work for a client and they have a briefing, and then you need to figure out what they want. That can be really difficult. So what I do then is I make a bunch of sketches, and so I really make, for example, the briefing is make a bird, and then I really draw a lot of different doodles with birds. Sometimes I make 50 drawings or something, but then I don't send them all to the client. I pick out my 5 favorites and I send those to the client. But when I struggle with something, I really dive into it and really try to make as much as different things as I can, and never be satisfied with your first drawing. Yeah.
Cool. Then last question. If you had the opportunity of giving your beginner self some key tips, what would they be?
Basically, the tips I gave about, for example, with this, really focus on studying construction first and line of action, going to figure drawing classes, and not focus too much on making your own characters yet or things. So really learn the drawing skills first, because when you have those drawing skills, you can then basically draw everything you want. But it's really good to focus on those skills first. Yeah.
Great tips, definitely inspiring. I actually plan to spend some time this weekend going over those tips and this recording of this session. Yeah, we pretty much covered all the questions. I mean, not all the questions. There are obviously tons of more questions, but a lot of those you have naturally answered them as part of your process. And I'm thinking more specific questions our audience can find the answers in your Instagram and through your tutorials.
Yeah,
So-
and also leave some comments on Instagram under the post. You can best place your questions under the post, and I happy to answer as much as I can there as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Let's use this opportunity to share my screen and give some more information to our audience about where they can follow you. Okay, I hope you all can see my screen now.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, great. Thank you all again for joining us today. Please do check and follow us on social media at Wacom and at Clip Studio Official. And obviously, I've seen you asking a lot in the chat box. Mitch is on Instagram with, okay, I think I'm gonna butcher your last name once again. I'm so sorry about that.
No problem.
On Instagram at Mitch Leeuwe.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
That's correct? Yeah,
Yeah.
I did it. Don't forget to visit our exclusive offer for you on estore.wacom.com/comicweek, and you can save up to 20%. And please do check your inbox next week for our email, including the YouTube links of the sessions, including this one, and offers from Wacom and Clip Studio Paint. That's pretty much it from us for today, for now, but we have another session upcoming at 2 p.m. Tips on creating your own character by Muley. So thank you all. Thank you, Mitch, so much for this amazing session. I hope to see you all soon again, and take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you. And thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.